twin royal princes each arranged a marriage, but the twins who arrived were also twins. The palace bells ring as two young men identical in face but divided in spirit stand before their father's throne. Across the courtyard, two veiled sisters step down from a carriage, their likeness so perfect the court gasps. At first, it seems like Providence, two princes, two princesses, a double wedding to bind kingdoms. But as goblets are raised and candles flicker, stolen glances reveal a dangerous truth. Each heart belongs to the wrong twin. And in the shadows, a scheming voice whispers, ready to turn desire into scandal. Because in this court, one slip of the tongue, one mismatched vow, can shatter a family and break a kingdom's peace. So when love defies duty, when treaties clash with hearts, which will triumph? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more morning light streamed through the towering stained glass windows of the Viennese Royal Council Chamber, painting rainbow patterns across the polished marble floor. The magnificent room, with its gilded ceiling and ancient tapestries, seemed to hold its breath as King Albrecht of Austria sat stern-faced upon his carved wooden throne. His twin sons, Crown Prince Leopold and Prince Maximilian, stood before him with perfect posture, their identical features masking very different hearts. "My sons," King Albrecht's voice echoed through the chamber, firm and unwavering. "The time has come to secure our kingdom's future." He paused, his sharp eyes moving between the two young men. "You shall both wed daughters of the Duchy of Falkenhof. Our treaties of trade and military support depend upon these unions." Leopold's face remained carefully composed, though his fingers tightened almost imperceptibly at his sides. Ever the dutiful heir, he gave a solemn nod. "As you command, father." Beside him, Maximilian shifted his weight, a flash of surprise crossing his features before he too bowed his head. "Yes, father." Though his words matched his brother's, they carried a warmth that Leopold's lacked. The king gestured to the scribes waiting nearby with their parchment and quills. "The arrangements must be formalized at once. The letters will depart for Falkenhof today." The scratching of quills filled the air as the royal scribes worked, their practiced hands flowing across cream-colored parchment. Red wax dripped onto the folded letters, and the king's seal pressed firmly into each, making the arrangements official. Outside in the castle courtyard, stable boys brought forth fresh horses for the messengers. The animals stomped their hooves against the cobblestones, their breath making clouds in the cool morning air. Royal messengers, wearing the king's colors, mounted up for the days-long journey to Falkenhof. In the busy castle kitchens below, servants gathered in hushed clusters between their duties, sharing excited whispers about the news that had already spread like wildfire through the palace. "A double betrothal," exclaimed a young kitchen maid as she kneaded bread dough. "Both princes to wed at once. 'Tis surely a blessing from above," agreed the cook, stirring a pot of soup. "Such perfect symmetry cannot be mere chance. The heavens must smile upon these matches. But they're as different as sun and moon, those two," mused an older servant, setting down a basket of vegetables. "Prince Leopold, so proper and serious, and Prince Maximilian, always ready with a kind word and a smile," added another, sighing dreamily. As evening fell, the twin princes retired to their shared chambers, where candlelight cast flickering shadows on the walls. Though they had long since outgrown the need to share quarters, they had never wished to separate, finding comfort in their lifelong closeness despite their differences. Leopold stood by the window, his reflection, ghost-like in the darkened glass. "What do you suppose they're like, these daughters of Falkenhof?" Maximilian lounged in a cushioned chair, his formal jacket already cast aside. "I pray they have good hearts," he said thoughtfully, "and perhaps a sense of humor. The court could use more laughter." "The alliance must be protected," Leopold murmured, more to himself than his brother. "Everything depends upon our success." "Come now, brother," Maximilian said gently. "Surely we might hope for more than mere success? Perhaps even happiness?" Leopold's stern expression softened slightly as he turned to face his twin. "I suppose even duty might allow for happiness, if fortune favors us." The brothers fell silent, moving to stand together at the window. Above the sleeping city, the moon hung full and bright, its silver light touching their identical faces with equal grace. Neither spoke of the anxieties that stirred in their hearts, of the unknown women who would soon shape their destinies. They simply stood together, sharing this quiet moment before sleep, unaware that far away in Falkenhof, two sisters were perhaps gazing at the very same moon. The autumn morning mist still clung to the towers of Falkenhof when the royal messenger arrived, his horse's hooves clattering against the cobblestones of the courtyard. Inside the duchy's great hall, Duchess Mariana broke the golden seal on the letter with steady hands, her face betraying nothing as she read the king's decree. "My daughters," she called, her voice echoing through the stone corridors, "come at once." Lady Eleonora looked up from her leather-bound book of histories, marking her place with a silk ribbon. In the music room next door, Lady Seraphine's fingers stilled on the harpsichord keys, the last notes fading into silence. The sisters entered their mother's study together, as different as dawn and dusk despite sharing the same face. Eleonora's gray dress matched her serious demeanor, while Seraphine's blue silk rustled with her eager movements. "The King of Vienna has decreed a double marriage," the Duchess announced, her eyes moving between her daughters. "His twin sons, Crown Prince Leopold and Prince Maximilian, are to wed the daughters of Falkenhof. We depart for court within the week." Seraphine clapped her hands together, her eyes bright with excitement. The Viennese court. Oh, think of the balls, the music, the dancing. But Eleonora's hands twisted in her skirts. "Mother, we know nothing of these princes. How can we? Peace, my dear ones." Duchess Mariana rose, taking each daughter's hand in hers. "This union means more than personal happiness. Our duchy's borders have long been threatened. This alliance will protect our people, secure trade routes, bring prosperity to thousands." The great house erupted into activity. Seamstresses rushed through corridors with bolts of finest silk and velvet. Maids folded delicate chemises and pressed court gowns. The click of trunk latches and scrape of wooden boxes echoed through the halls. In her chamber, Eleonora carefully packed her favorite books between layers of clothing. Her hands trembled slightly as she touched the spines. "What if they care nothing for learning?" she whispered to herself. "What if they mock quiet pursuits?" Next door, Seraphine twirled in front of her mirror, holding up different jewels to catch the light. "Think of it, sister," she called through the connecting door. "We shall be princesses. There will be music every evening, dancing until dawn." The morning of departure arrived cold and clear. The Duchess's carriage waited in the courtyard, loaded with trunks and provisions for the long journey. Eleonora paused at the top step, looking back at the only home she had ever known. Seraphine linked their arms together, giving her sister's hand a gentle squeeze. "Together," Seraphine whispered. As always. The journey proved long and trying. Autumn rains turned the roads to mud, forcing their carriage to slow to a crawl. Post riders galloped ahead each day, carrying word of their progress to Vienna. At night, they stopped at coaching inns, some grand, others humble. After 8 days of travel, they crossed the border into imperial lands. The inn that evening was clean but simple, with a great hearth fire casting flickering shadows on the walls. The sisters shared a small chamber under the eaves, their mother in the room next door. In their narrow bed, Eleonora and Seraphine lay close together, speaking in whispers as they had since childhood. "What do you think they're like?" Seraphine's voice was small in the darkness. "These princes were to marry?" Eleonora stared at the ceiling beams. "I pray they have kind hearts, but what if they're cold, cruel?" Seraphine's hand found her sister's beneath the blanket. "What if they care nothing for music or books or gentle things? Then we shall have each other." Eleonora squeezed her twins' fingers. "As we always have." They clasped hands tightly, drawing comfort from the familiar touch as they had through every storm and darkness of their lives. Slowly, their whispers faded into the quiet of sleep, while outside their window, the autumn wind whistled through bare branches, carrying them ever closer to their destiny in Vienna. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Viennese palace courtyard, as trumpets pierced the autumn air. Their bright notes announced the long-awaited arrival of the Falkenhof delegation. Dozens of courtiers lined the grand steps, their silk gowns and velvet doublets gleaming in the warm glow of hundreds of torches and lanterns that pushed back the gathering dusk. Prince Leopold and Prince Maximilian stood at attention beside their father, King Albrecht. The identical princes cut striking figures in their matching deep blue court attire, though Leopold's rigid posture contrasted with Maximilian's more relaxed bearing. The elaborate Falkenhof carriage rolled to a stop, its wheels crunching on the gravel. A footman rushed forward to lower the steps. The assembled court held its collective breath as the first sister emerged. Lady Eleonora stepped down carefully, her dove-gray traveling cloak settling around her shoulders. Before anyone could recover from their first glimpse of her beauty, Lady Seraphine followed, and a wave of astonished whispers swept through the crowd. Twins! The word rippled through the gathering. The Falkenhof girls are twins. The sisters stood side by side, mirror images in their matching gray cloaks and burgundy silk gowns. Even their dark curls were styled identically, crowned with delicate pearl nets. Only those who knew them well might notice Eleonora's more reserved bearing, or the slight spark of mischief in Seraphine's eyes. Duchess Mariana descended last, her presence commanding immediate respect. She approached King Albrecht with perfect dignity, curtsying deeply. "Your Majesty, I present my daughters." The court chamberlain stepped forward with his scroll of introductions. He had clearly not been prepared for identical sisters, and his eyes darted nervously between his papers and the young ladies before him. In his flustered state, he made the fateful error that would set unexpected events in motion. "Lady Seraphine of Falkenhof," he announced, gesturing to Eleonora, betrothed to Prince Maximilian. Eleonora's heart skipped a beat at the mistake, but years of courtly training kept her face serene. She dipped into a graceful curtsy before Maximilian, though her eyes briefly flicked toward Leopold. "And Lady Eleonora of Falkenhof," the chamberlain continued, indicating Seraphine, betrothed to Crown Prince Leopold. Seraphine, too, maintained her composure, though her fingers trembled slightly as she curtsied to Leopold. Neither sister dared speak up to correct the error. Such an interruption would be an unthinkable breach of protocol during a royal presentation. "'Tis surely divine providence," an elderly countess declared loudly. "Twins for twins. Heaven itself must have arranged this symmetry." Murmurs of agreement spread through the court. The king looked pleased, and the chamberlain, relieved that his ceremony had concluded without apparent issue, rolled up his scroll with satisfaction. As the gathering moved inside for the welcome feast, the great banquet hall blazed with hundreds of beeswax candles. Their lights sparkled off golden plates and crystal goblets, while servants bustled about with steaming platters of roasted meats and fresh-baked breads. The betrothed couples were seated side by side at the high table, Leopold with the false Eleonora, and Maximilian with the false Seraphine. Throughout the elaborate meal, glances darted back and forth across the polished oak table, weighted with unspoken concerns. Eleonora found her attention repeatedly drawn to Leopold's thoughtful demeanor and careful attention to protocol, even as Maximilian attempted to engage her in light conversation. Across from them, Seraphine struggled to focus on Leopold's serious discussion of state matters, her gaze constantly straying to Maximilian's warm smile and easy manner. The mix-up had paired each sister with the prince least suited to her nature, yet none of them could see a way to correct the error without causing embarrassment to the chamberlain, the king, and both courts. They were trapped by the very propriety and protocol that governed their lives. As the feast continued around them, the four young people picked at their elaborate meals, each lost in private thoughts about the unexpected turn their carefully arranged marriages had taken. The candlelight caught the troubled glances that passed between them, while above their heads, the court continued to marvel at what they saw as a perfect matching of twins to twins. The morning sun brought a flurry of activity to the palace. In the vast kitchens, copper pots clanged and wooden spoons scraped against mixing bowls as cooks prepared delicacies for the evening's feast. Servants scurried through stone corridors, their arms laden with fresh linens and polished silverware. The great hall echoed with the sound of footsteps as workers unfurled rich tapestries depicting scenes of past royal triumphs. In a corner of the palace's music room, musicians tuned their instruments, the sweet notes of violins mingling with the deeper tones of cellos. The master of ceremonies darted about, directing preparations with quick gestures and hushed commands. "The flowers there, the candles here," he instructed, his voice carrying the weight of decades of experience in court protocol. As evening approached, the great hall filled with nobles in their finest attire. Ladies swept in wearing silk gowns that rustled against the marble floors, while gentlemen stood tall in embroidered coats and gleaming boots. Hundreds of candles cast a warm glow over the assembled court, their light reflecting off golden plates and crystal goblets. Prince Leopold sat at the high table, his posture perfect, though his eyes kept straying to Lady Seraphine, who was seated beside his brother. Her musical laugh carried across the table, brightening the solemn atmosphere of the formal occasion. When she spoke of her love for poetry, Leopold found himself leaning forward, drawn to her passionate descriptions of verse and rhythm. Prince Maximilian, usually so jovial, found himself speaking in quieter tones with Lady Eleonora. Her thoughtful observations about the castle's ancient architecture and her knowledge of history impressed him deeply. He watched as she gently corrected a servant who had misplaced a dish, showing both wisdom and kindness in her gentle guidance. The feast progressed through 7 courses, each more elaborate than the last. Roasted peacocks, dressed in their own feathers, jellies molded into fantastic shapes, and pastries dusted with gold leaf appeared in steady progression. Yet the splendor of the food paled beside the growing realization in each twin's heart that something was not quite right. King Albrecht rose from his throne-like chair at the head of the table, his voice carrying across the hushed hall. "My loyal subjects," he proclaimed, "we gather to celebrate not one, but 2 unions that will bind our kingdom with the noble Duchy of Falkenhof." He raised his golden goblet. "I hereby declare the betrothal of Crown Prince Leopold to Lady Seraphine, and Prince Maximilian to Lady Eleonora." The court burst into enthusiastic applause, nobles stamping their feet and crying, "Huzzah!" Wine flowed freely as courtiers toasted the future marriages. Yet behind the screens, where servants waited with pitchers and platters, different words were whispered. "Did you see how Prince Leopold watched Lady Seraphine?" One maid murmured to another. And Prince Maximilian seemed quite taken with Lady Eleonora. "They gazed more at each other's intended than their own," agreed a footman, carefully keeping his voice low. "Strange indeed, for such an ordained match." As the feast drew to a close, the 4 young nobles retired to their separate chambers. In her room, Lady Eleonora sat before a crackling fire, her fingers absently tracing patterns on the arm of her chair. Her thoughts kept returning to Prince Maximilian's kind eyes and gentle humor, so different from the stern formality she had expected in a royal court. Across the palace, Prince Leopold stood at his window, watching autumn rain streak the glass. His hand clenched around a volume of poetry Lady Seraphine had mentioned, his heart torn between his father's decree and the unexpected connection he felt with his brother's intended bride. Prince Maximilian paced his chambers, pausing occasionally to stare into the flames. The quiet intelligence in Lady Eleonora's eyes haunted him, so different from the partner he had been assigned. In her own rooms, Lady Seraphine sat motionless before her mirror, remembering how Prince Leopold had perfectly finished a verse she had quoted, while her appointed match had merely smiled politely. Outside, the rain grew stronger, lashing against the palace windows with growing intensity. The sound matched the turmoil in 4 young hearts, each struggling with the weight of duty pressed against the unexpected stirrings of true affection. The dark night seemed to echo their unspoken question. How could they honor their obligations when their hearts pulled them in different directions? The Sunday morning light filtered through the stained glass windows of the royal chapel, casting rainbow-colored patterns across the marble floor. The congregation filed out slowly after Mass, their fine silk garments rustling as they descended the chapel steps into the palace gardens. Lady Eleonora walked beside Prince Maximilian, though protocol dictated she should have been at Leopold's side. Her heart quickened as she noticed how Maximilian's gentle smile brightened when their eyes met. Behind them, separated by several courtiers, Prince Leopold and Lady Seraphine maintained a proper distance, though their stolen glances spoke volumes. The Duchess of Weatherby, their appointed chaperone, followed at a dignified pace, her sharp eyes watching the young noble's every move. Yet even she could not prevent the brief moment when the pairs crossed paths near the rose arbor. The sermon spoke deeply of divine providence, Maximilian murmured to Eleonora as they passed. His warm brown eyes held such kindness that she felt her resolve weakening. "Indeed, your highness," she replied softly, "though sometimes God's will may differ from man's arrangements." Leopold, overhearing, cast a meaningful look toward Seraphine. "Truth often lies beneath surface appearances," he said, his measured words carrying weight beyond their simple meaning. The gardens provided brief occasions for such exchanges, with sympathetic servants creating small distractions that allowed moments of near privacy. Old Thomas, the head gardener, would suddenly require the chaperone's opinion on the health of certain roses. Mary, a kitchen maid, would accidentally drop her basket of herbs, drawing eyes away from the couples. During one such moment, sheltered by a tall hedge, Eleonora found herself beside Maximilian. His presence brought a peace she had never known with Leopold, despite the latter's admirable qualities. "Your wisdom matches your beauty," Maximilian said quietly. "Each day reveals new depths to your character that I—" He trailed off, aware of approaching footsteps. Meanwhile, Leopold and Seraphine had their own brief encounter by the fountain. His serious demeanor softened as she spoke of music and poetry, her lively spirit drawing out his hidden warmth. Their conversation, though brief, showed how perfectly their temperaments aligned. That evening, in her chamber, Eleonora confided in her trusted maid, Anna. Candlelight flickered across her troubled face as she sat at her dressing table. "I fear I shall wither if forced to live beside one I do not truly love," she whispered, twisting her handkerchief. "Leopold is honorable, yet my heart responds only to Maximilian's kindness." Anna's eyes filled with sympathy as she brushed her lady's hair. "The heart knows its true match, my lady. Even the servants see how you and Prince Maximilian share the same gentle spirit." Throughout the palace, whispers spread among the servants who witnessed these daily struggles. Kitchen maids exchanged knowing looks when Prince Leopold lingered near the music room where Lady Seraphine practiced. Footmen found reasons to delay announcing meals when Prince Maximilian and Lady Eleonora were deep in conversation about books and philosophy. As twilight deepened into evening, the palace bells began their slow toll for curfew. The four young nobles, who had managed to stay in the gardens until the last possible moment, reluctantly made their way toward the palace doors. The chaperone had stepped aside to speak with the head gardener, allowing a final, precious moment. Near the garden gates, partially hidden by climbing roses, the two pairs paused. The moon cast silver light across their faces as they exchanged glances heavy with unspoken meaning. "God himself must not wish hearts so divided," Maximilian whispered, speaking for them all. The others nodded, their shared pain and yearning evident in their expressions. The bells continued their solemn count as they parted, each returning to their designated places within the palace walls, carrying the weight of their mismatched betrothals. Their whispered vow hung in the night air, a prayer and a promise that somehow, their true heart's desires must find a way to prevail. Beneath 100 glittering chandeliers, the winter masquerade ball transformed the palace's great hall into a swirling wonderland of silk, velvet, and mystery. Silver frost patterns decorated the tall windows, while thousands of beeswax candles cast dancing shadows through the mirrored halls. Ladies in elaborate gowns and gentlemen in fine brocade moved like jeweled butterflies across the polished marble floors, their faces concealed behind intricate Venetian masks. Princess Eleonora adjusted her silver mask, adorned with delicate white feathers and tiny pearls. Her heart fluttered beneath her pale blue silk gown as she watched the dancers spin past. Through the crowd, she caught glimpses of her sister Seraphine in rose-colored silk, wearing a golden mask with ruby accents. They had chosen different colors tonight, for once embracing their separate identities rather than their usual twin symmetry. The violins began a stately minuet, and Eleonora felt a gentle tap on her shoulder. "May I have this dance, my lady?" came a familiar voice behind a black velvet mask trimmed with silver. Though his face was hidden, she would know Prince Maximilian anywhere by the warmth in his tone. Her pulse quickened as she placed her gloved hand in his. Across the room, Prince Leopold approached Seraphine, his forest green mask matching the emerald of her eyes. "Would you honor me?" he asked softly, and she stepped into his arms with barely contained joy. As the music swelled, the two couples joined the dance, weaving through the patterns of the minuet with practiced grace. Under cover of their masks, They could finally gaze openly at their true loves, sharing secret smiles and whispered words that propriety usually forbade. If only every night could be a masquerade, Eleonora murmured to Maximilian as he turned her beneath his arm. To dance with whom one chooses, to follow one's heart without fear of judgment. These moments make the weight of duty bearable, he replied, his fingers tightening gently around hers. The candlelight caught the gold thread in his jacket, making him seem to glow. Near the musicians' gallery, Seraphine laughed softly at something Leopold had said. Their steps perfectly matched as they glided across the floor. Her usually restless spirit found peace in his steady presence, while his reserved nature warmed in the light of her joy. But not all eyes watching the dancers were kind. Chancellor Rainer stood in a shadowed alcove, his hawk-like mask appropriate to his sharp observation of the scene before him. His keen gaze tracked the couples as they moved through the figures of the dance, noting every lingering touch, every too tender glance. The Chancellor's lips curved in a cold smile behind his mask. As the kingdom's master of protocol and keeper of diplomatic arrangements, he saw clearly how these young nobles gazed not at their intended partners, but at each other's betrothed. Such a scandal, if proven, could destroy not only the marriage contracts but the entire alliance with Falkenhof. The music changed to a livelier tune, and the dancers moved faster, caught up in the spell of the moment. Couples whirled past the great mirrors lining the walls, their reflections multiplying like dreams. The twins and their princes danced closer together now, switching partners occasionally as the steps required, each brief touch with their true love, sending sparks through their hearts. Look how they gravitate to the wrong partners, Rainer whispered to a fellow courtier. Most irregular, most interesting. He made mental notes of every deviation from proper pairings, building evidence for future use. The golden hands of the ballroom's great clock crept toward midnight. The master of ceremonies raised his staff, preparing to signal the traditional removal of masks. The spell of anonymity was about to break. The time has come, dear friends, he called out. Prepare to greet the new day with bare faces. The music ended with a flourish. Hearts pounding, the twins and princes reluctantly separated, moving back to their official partners. As the clock struck 12, masks were lifted throughout the hall. Revealed faces flushed with dancing, and secret emotions turned toward their proper companions, the magic of the masquerade dissolving like morning mist. Chancellor Rainer removed his mask last of all, his calculating eyes sweeping the hall. He noted how the young nobles avoided each other's gaze now, how their earlier radiance dimmed under the weight of reality. Such obvious signs of forbidden attraction would serve his purposes well. The evening's enchantment had ended, leaving behind only whispers of what might have been. But in that one precious night, 4 hearts had tasted true freedom, and the memory would not fade easily. Chancellor Rainer's footsteps echoed through the marble corridors as he approached the king's private study. His thin lips curved into a satisfied smile, clutching a sealed letter that contained his careful observations of the secret meetings between the mismatched couples. The morning sun streamed through frosted windows as he bowed before King Albrecht. Your Majesty, I bring grave news that threatens the security of our realm. King Albrecht looked up from his documents, his stern face shadowed with concern. Speak plainly, Chancellor. Your sons, my liege, they have betrayed your trust. During these past weeks, I have witnessed Prince Leopold meeting secretly with Lady Seraphine, while Prince Maximilian steals moments with Lady Eleonora. They mock your sacred decree with these forbidden liaisons. The king's face darkened like storm clouds gathering. He rose slowly from his chair, his hands gripping the edge of his oak desk until his knuckles whitened. You are certain of this? I have documented every meeting, Your Majesty. In the gardens, behind the chapel, during the masquerade ball, they thought their masks would hide their true intentions. Rainer's voice dripped with calculated concern. The king's fury exploded like thunder. He swept his arm across the desk, sending papers flying. Guards, he bellowed, bring my sons, and fetch those scheming princesses. Within moments, the chamber filled with the sound of armored footsteps. The princes were brought before their father, their faces pale but determined. The princesses followed, trembling but holding their heads high with dignity. You dare! King Albrecht's voice shook with rage. You dare to dishonor your crown, your blood, your sacred duty? He paced before them like a caged lion. These marriages were arranged to secure peace for thousands, yet you think only of your selfish hearts. Prince Maximilian stepped forward. Father, please, silence. The king's fist crashed against the desk. You are no better than common peasants, ruled by base desires instead of noble duty. He turned to the princesses, his eyes cold as winter frost. And you come to my court with your sweet faces hiding serpents' hearts. Duchess Mariana's daughters flinched at his words, but maintained their quiet grace. Tears glimmered in Eleonora's eyes, while Seraphine's chin lifted slightly in silent defiance. The treaties must stand, King Albrecht declared. I will not let 4 foolish children destroy what generations have built. He gestured sharply to the guards. Return these scheming ladies to Falkenhof under heavy guard. Let them learn obedience in their mother's house. The princesses were led away, their silk skirts rustling against the stone floors. Neither dared look back at the princes, though their hearts cried out in silence. As for you, the king turned to his sons, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You will remain confined to your chambers until you remember your duty to crown and kingdom. Better broken hearts than broken treaties. The princes were escorted to their rooms, passing courtiers who lowered their eyes in shame. Chancellor Rainer watched from the shadows, satisfaction gleaming in his dark eyes. In their separate chambers, Leopold and Maximilian knelt beside their beds as evening descended. Candlelight flickered against the walls as they bowed their heads in fervent prayer. Through the windows, they could see heavy snow beginning to fall, blanketing the palace grounds in white silence. Lord, Maximilian whispered, give us strength to follow our hearts, even against the crown itself. In his own room, Leopold's prayer echoed his brother's. Grant us courage to stand firm in what we know is right. The snow fell thicker now, sealing the roads with winter's icy grip. In their chambers, the princes remained on their knees, their determination growing stronger with each passing moment. Though separated by walls of stone, their hearts beat as one in their shared resolve. They would find a way to right this wrong, no matter the cost. Outside their windows, the winter storm howled like a beast, but in their hearts burned a fire that no cold could extinguish. The first warm breeze of spring whispered through Vienna's streets, melting the last patches of snow. In their chambers, Princes Leopold and Maximilian prepared for their boldest act yet. Under the cover of darkness, they donned simple wool cloaks and packed only what they could carry. Brother, Leopold whispered, his usually stern face softened by moonlight. Are you certain of this path? Maximilian adjusted the plain leather satchel across his shoulder. As certain as my heart beats for Eleonora. We cannot live this lie any longer. The castle clock struck midnight as they slipped through the servants' entrance where a modest carriage waited, its driver sworn to secrecy. No royal crests adorned its wooden panels, no fine horses stamped in gilded harnesses, just a simple merchant's conveyance that would draw no attention. Dawn found them many miles from Vienna, the road ahead churned to mud by spring thaws. Their fine boots, unused to such conditions, were soon caked with earth. At each inn and tavern, they presented themselves as traveling merchants, sharing rough bread and ale with fellow travelers. Did you hear tell of the Duchess of Falkenhof? A merchant asked them at one roadside inn, not knowing he spoke to princes. They say she rules with both wisdom and mercy. Why, just last harvest, she opened her granaries to feed the poor when crops failed. Leopold and Maximilian exchanged meaningful glances. Such tales of the Duchess's fairness strengthened their resolve through each difficult mile. In market towns and village squares, they heard more stories. How Duchess Mariana settled disputes with Solomon-like wisdom, how she treated peasant and noble alike with respect, how she had guided her duchy through war and famine with steady hands. Perhaps, Leopold mused one evening as they warmed themselves by an inn's hearth, she will understand matters of the heart as well as matters of state. Their post-riders had ridden ahead, carrying letters explaining their true feelings and intentions. Each day brought them closer to Falkenhof, though the journey was far from easy. Spring storms drenched them, muddy roads delayed them, and always they had to maintain their merchant disguise. Maximilian's naturally warm manner served them well, chatting easily with innkeepers and stable boys, while Leopold's quiet dignity lent them an air of respectability. They shared meals with farmers, listened to local gossip, and slowly made their way eastward. "I never knew how our people truly lived," Maximilian admitted one evening, watching a family share a simple supper at the next table. "Perhaps this journey teaches us more than we expected." After 12 days of travel, the towers of Falkenhof Castle finally appeared on the horizon, painted gold by the setting sunday. The princes' hearts quickened at the sight. Somewhere within those walls, Eleonora and Seraphine waited, perhaps unaware their true loves approached. The guards at the gate examined their travel papers carefully forged to pass initial scrutiny, but a steward who had been warned of their possible arrival recognized them despite their travel-stained appearance. They were quietly ushered into the castle as dusk settled over the countryside. Duchess Mariana received them in her private study, a warm fire crackling in the hearth. She stood as they entered, her face composed but not unkind. "Your Highnesses," she said, with a careful curtsy, "you have traveled far and risked much to come here." Leopold and Maximilian bowed deeply. Despite their muddy boots and wrinkled clothing, they carried themselves with quiet dignity. "Your Grace," Leopold began, his voice steady, "we come to speak truth, even if it costs us our inheritance." "We love your daughters," Maximilian added, his usual cheerful manner subdued by the gravity of the moment. "But not as the papers decree. I love Eleonora, whose quiet strength matches my joy, and Leopold's heart belongs to Seraphine, whose spirit brightens his solemnity." The Duchess listened in silence as they poured out the whole tale, the mixed-up introductions, the growing certainty that their hearts had chosen truly, the impossible weight of duty against love. The firelight flickered across her face as she absorbed their words, her expression thoughtful but unreadable. They stood before her, these princes who had traded silk for wool, palace comforts for muddy roads, all to speak truth to power. Their clothes might be travel-stained, but their hearts were clear. Within Falkenhof's great stone hall, shadows danced against tapestried walls as servants hastened to light more candles. The Duchess Mariana sat in her carved oak chair, her face illuminated by the warm glow. Before her stood the travel-worn princes, their plain cloaks still bearing traces of the muddy journey. "Your Grace," Prince Maximilian began, his voice carrying both exhaustion and hope, "we come seeking your wisdom and aid." The Duchess raised her hand, a gentle smile playing at her lips. "Peace, good princes. I have received your letters, and I confess, I have been waiting for this day." She gestured to a nearby chest, where an elderly steward stood guard. "Master Thomas, pray bring forth the documents." The steward produced a leather portfolio, its royal seals still intact. Inside lay the marriage treaties, their careful calligraphy stark against cream-colored parchment. "Observe," the Duchess said, spreading the papers before them. Her finger traced along the formal script. "The treaties speak only of a twin princess to be wed to each prince. Our careful scribes, whether by divine providence or human foresight, left the specific matching deliberately vague." Leopold leaned forward, his eyes widening. "Then there is hope? The agreements need not bind specific pairs?" "Indeed," Mariana nodded, her voice carrying the weight of maternal understanding. "Love finds its own way, as water finds its course. Who are we to dam its flow with mere clerical error?" Maximilian sank to one knee before the Duchess's chair. "Your Grace, you give us new life with these words, but how shall we proceed? The king's anger burns hot, and Chancellor Reiner feeds those flames." The Duchess rose, her silk skirts rustling as she paced the flagstone floor. "I shall return with you to Vienna," she declared. "This matter must be presented before the full council. They cannot ignore the voice of Falkenhof, nor the truth written in their own treaties." "Mother speaks with the authority of 20 years' rule," came a quiet voice from the doorway. Eleonora stood there, her sister Seraphine beside her. Both princesses wore simple blue gowns, their faces glowing with barely contained joy at seeing their true loves again. "The council respects her judgment," Seraphine added. "They know how she guided our duchy through both war and famine." The Duchess nodded to her daughters, though protocol prevented closer greeting with the princes present. "We shall depart tomorrow at first light. Tonight, you may seek heaven's blessing in the chapel." As darkness fell across the duchy, 4 figures made their way through torchlit corridors to Falkenhof's ancient chapel. Stone saints gazed down from shadowed niches as the lovers approached the altar rail. The brass sanctuary lamp cast a steady gleam, while dozens of votive candles flickered in their red glass holders. Eleonora's hand trembled as it found Maximilian's across the rail. "I feared I would never see you again," she whispered, her quiet strength shining through her tears. "Not even the king's decree could keep me from you," he replied, his usual cheerful manner subdued by the solemnity of their meeting. Beside them, Leopold and Seraphine clasped hands as well, their fingers intertwining. "We shall face whatever comes together," Leopold vowed, his customary reserve melting as he gazed at his true love. "With God's grace and your mother's wisdom," Seraphine added, looking to her sister with shared hope. The 4 young nobles knelt there in the sacred space, their whispered prayers rising with the incense that still lingered from evening devotions. Their joined hands rested on the altar rail, a bridge across the divide that had nearly separated them forever. Through the chapel's high windows, stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Each point of light seemed to echo the candle flames below, where 4 hearts beat as one in love and prayer, gathering courage for the trials that lay ahead on the road back to Vienna. Morning sunlight streamed through the towering windows of Vienna's Great Hall, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor. The royal council members sat in their carved chairs, their faces stern beneath powdered wigs. At the head of the chamber, King Albrecht occupied his gilded throne, his expression as unyielding as granite. Duchess Mariana of Falkenhof stood before them all, her burgundy silk gown rustling softly as she held up the treaties. Her voice rang clear and strong through the hushed chamber. "My lords, examine the words penned by your own hands. These documents speak only of a twin princess for each prince. No specific matches were decreed." Chancellor Reiner leaped to his feet, his face flushed with anger. "This is mere wordplay, your majesty. The arrangements were clear in intent." "Were they?" The Duchess turned to face him, her eyes sharp. "Or did you, Chancellor, create confusion where none need exist?" The princes stepped forward then, standing tall despite their father's withering gaze. Prince Maximilian spoke first, his usually mirthful face solemn. "Father, I would rather surrender my title than betray my heart's true choice." "And I the same," Prince Leopold added, his quiet voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "We have not acted from caprice or rebellion, but from love's honest guidance." Whispers rippled through the assembled courtiers like wind through summer wheat. Ladies pressed handkerchiefs to their lips, while lords shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The scandal of princes defying their father's will hung heavy in the air. King Albrecht rose slowly from his throne, his jeweled rings catching the light as he gripped the arms of his chair. For a long moment, he studied his sons' faces. Something in their steadfast determination seemed to reach past his royal armor, touching the father's heart beneath the crown. "You would choose disgrace over duty?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "We would choose truth over pretense," Maximilian answered. "Is that not the highest duty of princes?" Leopold stepped closer to his father's throne. "You taught us that nobility flows not from titles, but from honor. We honor our heart's truth, even at the cost of your favor." The king's stern facade cracked, revealing a glimmer of pride in his eyes. He turned to study the treaties in the Duchess's hands, then looked to where Eleonora and Seraphine waited with quiet dignity by their mother's side. "Perhaps," he said at last, his voice softening, "nobility of heart is greater than any parchment." A collective gasp rose from the assembly. The king raised his hand for silence. "Chancellor Reiner, you are dismissed from our service. Your attempt to create discord where harmony should reign has no place in this court." The chancellor's face twisted in fury, but royal guards stepped forward to escort him from the chamber. As he departed, it seemed as though a shadow lifted from the great hall. "Let the unions be blessed as love has chosen them," the king declared. "Maximilian with Eleonora, Leopold with Seraphine. Let it be recorded thus." Joy erupted through the chamber. Courtiers applauded, ladies dabbed happy tears, and even the sternest council members smiled. The princes embraced their chosen brides, as the Duchess looked on with maternal satisfaction. Within the week, Vienna's cathedral blazed with countless candles as the double wedding began. Sunlight poured through stained glass windows, painting rainbow patterns across the guests' finest silks and velvets. The great pipe organ filled the vaulted space with triumphant music as four hearts joined as two. When the ceremonies concluded, the cathedral bells began to peal, their joyous sound echoing across the city. As the couples emerged into the sunlit square, they found crowds of both nobles and commoners gathered to celebrate. Cheers rose up like thunder as the newlyweds descended the cathedral steps hand in hand. Rose petals showered down from upper windows as the couples made their way to waiting carriages. Their faces glowed with happiness, their love sealed not by chance but by courage and divine grace. The people's celebration continued long into the evening, for they had witnessed true nobility triumph, not the nobility of birth alone, but the greater nobility of faithful hearts. Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay with you.